North Sea rise river of the Mediterranean मैं नहीं जानता पापा जी मैं नहीं जैसा ठंडा में वो गुद जल में छुपाते जाता ना समर में एक दो महीने गए चुदर एक दो वीडियो करके मैं वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज का under this time I'm the world of criminal ghoshes of the criminals annihilators ghoshes annihilators of Mexican Gulf clear system that climate changers associations evils destructive association world of devils the world of evils ghoshes world of criminals world of murder mother truth spy world of criminals leftist Bengali yes world at the nose of USA of US doing drama here drawing drama o pap ka dhan se chudu elon ghosh chudu marani sala elon ghosh chudi elon kai kata chudi elon ki datta chudi elon kama chudi elon das उन्हा कई कहते चुदिर नंदी का कुछ चुदिर सिंह गुद मारन गुदर महिला से सिंह हार्ड या हॉर्नी घोष खुनिया घोष हाँ कटर हंटर घोष चुद मारनी सल वर्ल्ड ऑफ क्रिमिनल मैक्सिकन गर्ल the world of criminal Mexican girl the world of criminal Mexican girl world of criminal Mahoshi Nasihar Mujairam Batiki evil ghoshes a world of criminals Mata Chud Mosnapur Shihorki 741 741 yes 741 or something is 160 170 something yes 721 161 Jaramati is your post office bank what I did from my panchayat evils of corpses come on that Ma Sarada that Sarada can do ghoshes evil ghoshes Sarada Kunal Ghosh Canal Ghosh Pap Canal se Pap Ghoshes criminal सब बहुत junta Ghosh evil Ghosh Kutta Ghosh Khune Ghosh Nararakhat Ghosh असभ्य बहुत जानवर Ghosh Mexican Gal the world of Ghosh criminal Ghosh is Bengali world of criminals Mexico Gal world of criminal Mexico Gal world of criminal Mexico Gal criminal climate changers say and that
that sort of imperial system. The other end was, of course, New England. So, there was New Amsterdam, there was the New Netherlands, which was the area around New York. And actually, later in the 17th century, the Dutch ceded New Amsterdam in exchange for the island of Rhun. This tiny little island, it's an extraordinary thing, but the Nutmeg Islands were worth much more than New England at that particular moment. But so, you have the same pattern of genocides occurring in New England. The Pequots, for example, if you think of King Philip's War and so on. So that was the pattern. I think that was actually sort of imported into the Bandas. That's what made them think that they could do this. And they did it. So, this is a history which very few people know about. Though it's not unknown either, because it's what happened. But, when I went to the Banda Islands, I didn't really know, I knew the sort of bare outlines, but I didn't really know the utter horror of what had really unfolded. Because the Dutch massacred these Bandanese in the space of most of the massacre happened in the space of 1 week. It's just utterly ghastly. So I had no idea about that. But once I was there, I learned about it. And, as it happens, it settles in your head, and then you have to think about it, And I thought and thought and thought. And then I wanted to write because I could see that this event brought together a lot of things that I've been thinking about. And I planned, I planned to start work in early March. I had another project out there, and I finished that project. And then in early March, I started writing, and then suddenly, of course, there was the pandemic, and everything closed down, and I was in Brooklyn, New York. And, so there was this sort of strange, eerie silence, broken only by ambulances, shrieking past my house. So it was that strange moment, when you could sort of really recapture that sort of deep focus, which is so difficult to find most of the time, But, I was able to do it at that time, and, so I just wrote and wrote and wrote.
I love the passage early in the book. So this is a book about the fate of our world in many ways, and it takes what happened on Banda centuries ago as kind of central parable for the problems that we face today, global warming, the after effects of empire, and many other problems. One of the fascinating things about the book is the way that the nutmeg itself becomes kind of like planetary in its significance, and the way that events from long ago kind of reverberate outward into the geopolitical conditions that we inhabit today. But there's a wonderful passage early in the book where this scene of you being in Brooklyn with the beset by the pandemic, but making the most of it, you're trying to get started on this project, and you have to be quite resourceful because you don't speak Dutch. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that whole? I found amid the deep concern and anxieties and dread, in some way, that the book ventures into, that there were moments of comedy. There's some quite funny moments in the book, and this was one of them.
Yeah, well, I must say it's greatly to the credit of the Dutch. I mean, they recognized the horror of what they'd done. I mean, from the 19th century onwards. I mean, in fact, some of the most important sort of anti-colonial voices were Dutch in the mid-19th century. There's a famous book called Volcanoes. I don't know if any of you have read it, written by a writer under the pseudonym Max Havelaar. It's a very, very powerful book. And a really profound sort of indictment of European colonialism. They have been writing about this for a very long time, which is greatly to their credit. And in fact, one of the most important books written on this, in fact, the only sort of really important book written on this, it was by a man called Van der Kuys, who was the state archivist in what was then called Brotehr, Jakarta. And he had access to all the 17th century original documents. And he wrote a long book about, what happened, what Jan Peterson Cohen did. I mean, really incredibly detailed. And, I'd read about this book because there's a very short book by actually an American historian called Wilfred Hanna on the Banda Islands. And he mentions in that book that the massacre started with the falling of a lamp, a lamp fell in a village, and that really sort of spooked the Dutchmen, and they started shooting in every direction and just went berserk after that. So I just wanted to know what happened? Because, being a novelist, these things, the concreteness of a detail like that just lodges itself in your head. And I thought to myself, I've got to find this. So crazy. What did you randomly?
What?
In older Dutch, right?
Not always it is in older Dutch, but I don't know Dutch. So it would have been a room stone for them. But then, what happened? Is that I started looking through this PDF and actually, lamp has the same meaning in Dutch. So I came to that thing and I said, this page, is it going to resist me? No, it will not. And I started taking, I started typing individual paragraphs into a translation app. And strangely, sense appeared. Not perfect sense, but some sense appeared. But sometimes it would be completely garbled. And the garbled bit was when this guy, Chanegrs, was quoting 17th century sources. Because of course, the translation app is meant for modern Dutch, whereas, like the difference between me and you, that sort of thing, that you have in English. So then I looked off to a friend of mine who was an eminent historian of the Dutch East India Company, and he very kindly introduced the set of concordances. And then when I started changing the credits and so on, there was more so I could make actually unravel the meaning. I actually create a timeline of exactly what had happened. Day and so on. And because, for me, it was just incredibly growing.
So that's you could only find yourself doing that kind of painstaking, obsessive work in lockdown, in conditions, or is that how you always work?
Yes, I've done a lot of that actually, because on my third book in fact, was called Humanity Annihilators, and the last part of it is based upon the letters of a Jewish trader from North Africa who went to live in India in the 12th century, and those letters are written in a very obscure language called Judeo-Arabic, which is basically Arabic written in the Hebrew script. So I deciphered those letters as well, and because they had not been translated at that point. So that was even more difficult because at least this was a printed manuscript. In that I had to sort of decipher orthography, which was very difficult. I like that kind of, I suppose at heart I'm a kind of nerdy Indian,
Redundant, isn't it? That nerdy Indian kind of went together all. So did you, so you mentioned, so early in the book is this account of this kind of the very first moment that this genocide begins, when these kind of terrified Dutch troops are waiting in the night for something to happen, and a lamp drops, and that sets them off shooting into the darkness, and kind of terrible things follow. And that little detail, I imagine in the original source, just a very little detail that anyone would overlook. But for some reason that caught your imagination, right? The same way that nutmeg is something that we don't really notice in our daily lives unless we're preparing a dish or something, but then can assume extraordinary world historical significance when one actually begins to look at it, right? So this falling of the lamp that caught your attention and then opens up this historical narrative that we're still inhabiting returns at the end of the book because this mystery of like what did this little insignificant event caused by gravity, the falling of the lamp in the night halfway around the world, have such repercussions to this day. And I won't spoil the happy ending, because in some ways the book is a mystery, because we kind of, as we travel through the world over the course of the book, we lose sight of that original mystery of the falling of the lens, and then it returns in a kind of astonishing way at the end, and in some ways you propose a solution to the mystery of the falling of the lens. How did that structure come to you? Did you know that you always wanted to end the book with a possible answer to what happened, what caused this violent reaction to the smallest of events? Or did you, toward the end, at some point in the writing of the book, you say, well, now I think I understand what those Dutch settlers or invaders were what triggered them?
Well, no, I didn't know. When I started, I didn't know where I was going to end up. But, how shall I say? It was just sort of trying to understand the entirety of the circumstance. Because actually, the significance of the nutmeg for me is it becomes a way of trying to think of the agency of botanical entities, of how do non-human entities create history? How do they enter history? And this is something which actually goes back even further for me to a set of three books that I wrote for the high hostility, and a lot of it is about opium, which again the Dutch played a very big part in, because they really turned opium into a sort of commodity of mass trade, again in the 17th century, and the British took it one step further and started cultivating opium on a large scale in India. And all this opium was basically meant for export to China and Southeast Asia. It's sort of really horrifying story, I must say, and that was led to the first opium wars and so on, with the British forcing opium upon China. But, I wrote those books, I started writing those books about 2005, 2006, and that's exactly when the opioid crisis erupted in America. And, when the opioid crisis was written about in America, nobody ever placed this in the context of the Chinese opioid crisis of the 19th century. But actually, they're eerily similar. There's so many bizarre similarities, and I'm actually writing a book about that right now. And of course, Americans don't mention it, because the last place in the world they would want to compare themselves to was China. But in fact, China has lived through this. They lived through the same thing. And, when you look at the two similarities, you realize that actually opium is making its own history. It's making its own history. We are not in charge. Opium is creating patterns which links through history in this way. So that's sort of,
कैसे चलते कोई छिले ठीक होई
how did non-human
opium
silence? How does non-human agency come to be silence? Pre-modern forms of literature, storytelling, or whatever,
actor is trying to
the agency of non-humans.
On climate change, with opium, climate change, actor is telling something, writing on metal, remaining on metal, making other people's headache. Opium was needed for that evil, your Ghosh family. So you, for Gujarati Modi and you, opium criminal, cocaine criminals, to kill others and...
And how does that happen? So as I was writing this book, really it became evident to me that actually, when you
criminal,
like Western Sale or whatever, what you really is that it was philosophers like Descartes and Bacon and Locke and so on who assert that the world is a machine.